All right, welcome back to the latest episode of the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association podcast, The Road Ahead. Today we sit down with Mark Abrahamson with Acrisure to expose the invisible risks, the myths of annual MVRs, clearinghouse misconceptions, and why DataQs and telematics can change how underwriters and attorneys see your fleet. We'll also discuss some quick checks in the FMCSA portal and Safer Web to catch problems before they become headlines. Our very own Kim Conrad, Safety Programs Coordinator, sat down with Mark to discuss all of these topics and so much more. But before we join them, this episode of the WMCA podcast is brought to you by Acrisure, proud supporter of Wisconsin's trucking community. Every day, carriers rely on trusted partners to keep their business moving. Acrisure delivers personalized insurance, benefits, and risk management solutions built specifically for the transportation industry. From protecting your fleet to supporting your drivers, Acrisure helps you stay ahead of the road ahead. Learn more about how their expert advisors can support your business at acrisure.com. Acrisure, protection that drives results. Okay, Kim and Mark, take it away.
Well, we're here today with Mark Abrahamson from Acrisure, and we're going to discuss some compliance challenges that the motor carrier industry is having. And Mark has had so much experience on both sides as a state inspector and as a risk manager. So, Mark, I appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. That was actually an offer I was not going to turn down. You know that we certainly like to support the Motor Carriers Association and all the efforts to help support the trucking community. And I'm looking forward to participating here today. And maybe if you don't mind, I'll just do a brief introduction for those listening in.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get started, tell us all about yourself and your decades in the industry. I don't mean to age you, but we've all been around for decades.
I'm still a young person. But anyways, so I started my career with the Wisconsin State Patrol at quite a young age. So it was in my very young 20s. I pretty much worked the first 8 years doing normal patrol work and throughout the Fox Valley, Sheboygan counties, Manitowoc, Winnebago County, Outagamie, kind of staying in not so much at safety and weight facilities, did a lot of portable enforcement, which gave me an opportunity to come across, I guess, a little bit more of the operators that didn't take the seriousness of safe operation to heart. But as a great opportunity, kept me in very good shape for those first 8 years. Then I went into some management positions where I supervised our facilities in north central Wisconsin out of our Wausau State Patrol post. And then I went took the opportunity to come back to Fond du Lac, and I was a State Patrol sergeant and also the inspector out of the Northeast region. And the beauty of that allowed me then ultimately to take all my experiences and take a position out of our Hill Farms office at headquarters, where I supervised the motor carrier enforcement and investigation unit. And of course, that's kind of the end of the game about what could be done with enforcement in terms of my staff were the ones that would compile all the safety data, would prioritize the carriers having the most struggles with safety management. And of course, they'd be the ones that got selected to have a safety audit done, which, as we're all aware, that safety audit has the biggest hurt and pinch to operations. So I also did some teaching for the National Training Center for Passenger Carrier. And the other nice thing I had there was to be the DataQ administrator for the state of Wisconsin. Then, it wasn't even 3 months before I retired, I already knew I had a new job with my current employer, Acrisure. And now I have the benefit of working on the carrier side, helping them navigate the complexities, I guess, of commercial motor vehicle regulations, these DataQs, all these federal programs to help them keep premier safety scores. Because those are some of the issues, as well as we want safe operation. We don't want to have crashes. We don't want losses, because that ultimately undermines the profitability of a company trying hard to make it work. So I'm working on the good side now, so to speak. And what a fantastic
Mark, but you left out a big important part that some people don't know about. You were the ATA North American Inspector of the Year, and I can't remember the year, but it was in New Orleans. And that takes in all the 50 states and Canada and Mexico. And you brought the trophy home to Wisconsin, and we're very proud of that. Which, by the way, how did you get that trophy home?
Yeah, well, I'm very humble, Kim. I like to
I
do the
know.
job and stay down low, so to speak, and support our safety teams that are out there. But yeah, in 1995, I had a chance to get indoctrinated down to Bourbon Street in Louisiana, and I can tell you that was an indoctrination even for a Midwestern Wisconsin boy. And but that was the week-long competition that they bring in state competitors from the United States, Canada, and Mexico, who kind of competes through oral interviews, inspections, testing, knowledge, and so forth, where they end up granting what's called the ultimately the Grand Champion Award. So, yeah, it was back then. Trophies were huge in 1995, and I had to fly home with that thing, and wasn't going to fit in the bag. So, it created a lot of questions. But the beauty we had that year, Kim, is our driver that was sent to nationals also won the Grand Champion. So, what a
Wow.
beautiful for me and him to meet, shake hands after the awards banquet. To me was it'll be forever be an experience that I remember because even back then I did a lot of work at our truck driving championships. So to see those drivers win, and I was fortunate to be accepted or win that award. It was just nice to show Wisconsin does it right. We really do. We have some very good companies, drivers, even law enforcement that puts a lot of pride into commercial motor vehicle safety.
Yeah, and I said that that actually gave you the opportunity to see both sides of the drivers. You probably saw a lot of kind of bad drivers out there. Now you saw the good drivers who actually did take care of the equipment, did the job, did the pre-trip, etc. So,
100%. 100%.
um,
And that's
when
why, yeah, even just what I should say with that, because Kim, that's a very relevant point because I know for the drivers, they don't always see the enforcement side, or they might feel the enforcement sides a little rough or tough and hard on them, so to speak. When I had the opportunity to even participate at the truck driving championships in Wisconsin, do pre-trip judging, it was a very humbling experience. And what it did is it showed me those drivers. They're from Wisconsin, of course. They weren't unbiased. It's my hometown, so to speak. I really got to see what a pre-trip looks like, and it gave a very positive image of supporting those drivers doing it right, and for those that maybe aren't, to help give them some encouragement and some education to do it right.
while we're talking about that, how long do you think a pre-trip should take?
Well, it's not 4 or 5 minutes, I can say that. And it's not just walk around with a tire kick. That's a very common question. And when I do demonstrations of pre-trips for drivers at driver meetings, or we've done it for other learning events, I mean, granted, I'm doing a little yapping, I'm talking, so maybe I'm in at least 15 minutes plus, minimally, if not just a little bit more. But I'm saying, if you're doing a good pre-trip, because it does require to take a knee with a flashlight, be looking across the axles underneath, looking for wheel seal leaks, what I can see from brake components, and what I can see from brake air hoses, which is a huge violation across the United States for most individuals, to check to make sure that my kingpin's locked in, that I'm not going to lose my trailer. They get a positive lock, and then checking all those tires, looking between the tires. It's a little physical exercise program for the drivers. And it's extremely critical. You cannot let the pre-trips go.
On your inspector side, so knowing all that, how did you decide? I mean, now they have the scales and they have all the pre-pass and they have all the bells and whistles, but how did you decide, or doing a roadside inspection, how did you decide which vehicle to pull over or when to stop, or what did you look for?
It's a very good question and asked quite a bit. I didn't have necessarily the technologies to select vehicles so much other than the weigh-in motion system we used to have in the Beatemore Bridge. But other than that, it's really your observations. And I can say that, well, you're driving in a patrol car at 55 miles an hour and the truck's going in the opposite direction at 55. You can read license plates. You can see expiration decals. You get good at that. But the other biggest thing is what stands out the greatest amount? It's lighting. Lighting, ID lamps, clearance lamps, headlights. We have so many of them on a truck, so many great opportunities for them to be detected. So what I would say is what most officers want, they want a reason for a stop. And the reason I said they want a reason for a stop, they don't want to be stopping drivers for no reason, because those are the ones when we had to do it, let's say random inspections I had to do, like every 10th truck under a special program, they end up being very negative contacts, and it's not good for the driver. It's not good for the officer. It just goes down the road of lack of the spirit of cooperation, working together as an industry. So they always want a reason. So lights as they drive by. If I'm sitting in a crossover in a highway system, yeah, I'll write down the US DOT number real quick. I can type it into my laptop computer on a Wi-Fi at that time. Within 3 to 4 seconds, it brought back their safety rating. In terms of inspect, optional, or pass, that could be a decision factor. Missing mud flaps, well, an obvious tire flapping on the road that's flat, they generally want to see a violation. So as you mentioned, the pre-trips, if I know the driver's doing a fantastic pre-trip, taking that time, and they're detecting the lights, they're detecting any deficiencies, and they fix it before they leave, the chances of them running across another DOT officer, let's say, for example, in Wisconsin, there's only approximately 90 DOT actively working the road DOT trained officers in general, especially from the state patrol. Others are doing school bus activities, ambulance inspections. So, and if you only got those many people over 72 counties, and if you've done a good pre-trip and you've checked your lights, the chances of your light burning out, being detected by that roadside officer, just happens to be in that area at that day, they stops and gives you the warning, you're really playing some unique odds. So good pre-trips will certainly keep you out of the eye of the DOT and let them move on to somebody else who's having real issues with that.
You mentioned the safer score, their CSA score. Do you think that the drivers understand how those ratings come? And even like I've talked to inspectors who say, well, we only gave your driver a warning. So they were doing the driver a favor, or they were doing somebody a favor, but I don't think that they realize that that warning doesn't do anybody a favor. So what is your understanding about what maybe the inspector understands about it, what maybe the driver understands about it?
What I can say is that when the CSA program came out well, we've always had an evaluation program. There was a program before CSA, Compliance, Safety, and Accountability, went through some name changes. But ideally in 2010 is when they kind of kicked it off and they started revealing more of your safety data to the public. The DOT officers across the United States are not familiar with CSA, very, very few, because it's a federal program. It's a program meant to evaluate a carrier's safety management practices based upon what the officers do. So a crash report, a violation report gets written. It feeds the system to ultimately once a month do an algorithm, a methodology to try to compare a company to similar size, similar amount of inspections to kind of put them in their peer group. Roadside officers, some may say, I don't care, it's a federal program. Some are learning about it now because they're hearing more because DataQs are being filed and wondering, why are they DataQing a warning? Well, because a warning is just as severe as a citation when it comes to CSA points in that program. So yeah, if drivers sometimes feel that the inspector gave them a break for a speed violation or following too close, say, hey, and the officer's right, I'm just giving you a warning because I'm not putting you through the court system. But when the driver accepts that piece of paper and it goes into the CSA system, it might as well be a citation to a company because it has the same points. If they do get a citation, then there's always the opportunity if the driver felt it was unfairly issued or the carrier helps them, they can do a citation adjudication if they go to court and it ultimately gets dismissed or reduced. That's a huge thing there. So drivers are confused. They think they're getting away with the warning and hey, it might never even come back to the company. That's not true. Or again, the officers don't realize what the effects of that is. So what's important with that, bottom line is, every part feeding that system, the officer's traffic stop and how the driver reacts to the traffic stop and the carrier, all those individuals are responsible in the end to make sure the data that gets uploaded is true and accurate. Camera systems are important. The knowledge of the officer is important. So the agency that employs that officer, you hope, has an adequate training program. And I know, for example, my experience in the state of Wisconsin, a very good program. They have regular in-service programs that are occurring. They teach them on new technology. They teach them on any changes to the out-of-service criteria. So very proud to say that's a state that I know does a great job.
100% agree. I'm wondering also, like, so some of the smaller companies, or well, any size company actually, but some of the smaller companies, you have the same person who's the safety, who's HR, who's payroll, who's everything. So what do you think the biggest compliance challenges are for them and managing their CSA score or their all the compliance issues?
Well, they're Gumbies. They are being pulled everywhere. They have too many responsibilities. And if you're a large organization, you really need to rethink that position placement for that individual because compliance is extremely important for civil and criminal liability. A smaller organization, less than 10 truck operation, maybe they're good at that. Maybe they can juggle it. I've heard of some safety managers say, I'd like to be involved in HR type of activities and safety because I can better manage my drivers, know when there's maybe some issues going on at home that maybe I shouldn't dispatch a driver that day. Maybe I need to get him back for something to make sure that we maintain the driver's health and well-being, kind of things. But from a compliance perspective, if we get too far away from compliance where HR, operations, and so forth, other responsibilities are consuming your time, if you fall apart on your compliance portion, we may lose the adequate or proper CSA scores, go into an alert, which is going to trigger insurability issues. If you work with a broker's not going to want to work with you. Shippers and receiver accounts could be lost. So that individual, whoever it is, if they're going to fill that role, continue education, attending seminars. I know, for example, Motor Carrier Association has lots of seminars. You yourself, Kim, I applaud you doing it here in Wisconsin. Doing the NAPNI training that gives the certified director of safety gives options for our carriers and our individuals in our state to be the best. So at least to get the baseline down with compliance, and because ideally what we want is these owners have put a lot of money in these companies. They've taken a lot of risk. The profit margins aren't so phenomenal as what people think. I always joke a little bit thinking it's like running a gas station, so we can't afford to have loss. So if they're taking advantage of these opportunities for training, staying on top of the rules and regulations, they're setting themselves up to win and be profitable and grow. We want Wisconsin industries to grow.
Mark, in your position now with Acrisure, and we thank Acrisure for sharing you with us as often as you do for some of those seminars. We appreciate that. But you go into the businesses, you go into different size carriers, I'm sure. What do you find the common misunderstandings of what they should be aware of, what they need to do, what they don't need to do, what trainings they have to have? What do you find when you go in to train them or show them what they need to have?
Yeah, my response will be somewhat universal. Even when I was still back in the state patrol days doing these call them safety audits and safety reviews. I'm dating myself, compliance reviews. Now I come and do kind of a little assessment and so forth. If it's a smaller company, some of them don't even realize if they have a trucking fleet. Anything has a gross vehicle weight rating of over 10,001 pounds in the door jamb of the truck, they don't even realize they're subject to the rules and regulations. They just feel they're a small truck. I don't have any CDL drivers. That's the thing. I don't have any CDL drivers. I'm not subject to your rules. Well, that's not true. We have two layers of DOT compliance. We have small DOT operations, non-CDL, and there's larger operations that are CDL related. So I find occasionally clients that will, or back in the days of providing safety assistance, where they didn't think they're subject because they had non-CDL units, but Wisconsin is favorable to non-CDL companies, and we have a lot of exemptions, but there's still some minimum requirements that must be met for basically vehicle equipment standards, annual DOT inspections on those trucks. But once we get into the CDL required, then we're getting into Fed Med cards. We're getting into the CDLs, Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, drug and alcohol programs. So another misconception with that is sometimes the carriers think, I never leave the state. I never haul interstate freight. I'm not subject to any of that stuff. Well, it simply isn't accurate. Anybody that is required to have a CDL is required to be participating in the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse and the drug and alcohol programs. And ironically, that is probably back in the days of the investigation unit and even in current federal investigations, some of the largest enforcement activity takes place for failure to have an adequate or proper drug and alcohol program, because it's nothing more than monitoring a piece of paper to see if you're enrolled, if you've been participating, did you meet your 10% and 50%? Do you have your drivers enrolled in the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse? Because if you don't have that, if you have not checked them in the clearinghouse, how do you know if they eventually become prohibited? And then if you don't know and they become prohibited, and they have that serious crash, we can't afford that. There's no company out there can afford to have a prohibited driver out there or an unqualified driver, because we're all well aware the plaintiff attorneys have learned how to turn that big green book, as I say it, or other regulatory books that are out there. They use it back against the carrier, and the safety directors end up on the hot seat doing depositions, and then ultimately there's judgments that occur and or settlements that will kill the industry. So if we do, from a safety standpoint, if everybody does follows the rules as they know, they shall prevent those kind of losses.
This episode of the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association podcast, The Road Ahead, is brought to you by Acrisure, delivering insurance, benefits, and risk management solutions built for the trucking industry. From fleet protection to driver support, Acrisure helps you stay ahead of the road ahead. Learn more at acrisure.com.
So in the compliance, having, so many companies just say, oh, we have to run the MVR once a year. Oh, we have to do the yearly review. Some things are coming up right now with this, with the whole FedMed card being uploaded. There's still, I believe, 8 states that haven't complied yet. And there's like a lot of providers that are getting error messages and not checking back. So the driver thinks the card is uploaded, but it's not. So if they don't go back in and check, they're prohibited. And what should every carrier do? And driver too.
Yeah, back in the day, that was okay, right? Back in the day, if I was gonna comply with my DQ file, it only required me to do an MVR run and sit down with the driver once a year. Well, I'll tell you what, that's wholly inadequate now. And the partial reason I'm saying that is up to about 3 to 4 years ago, your roadside officers queried simply your home state of licensure. And it's called NLITS, National Law Enforcement Telecommunication System. That's all they used. If your home state license was valid, you're going to drive down that road. What was going on in the background for years before that is if you had traveled, let's say, to Disneyland, and you obtained a parking ticket and you didn't pay for it down in Florida, wherever it was, well, Florida could turn around and suspend your driving privileges in Florida. You may not know about it. In the new system now is they're required to query CDLIS, Central Driver's License, or Commercial Driver's License Information System, which does query a clearinghouse, which is now detecting drivers, even as early for one of our clients as yesterday, we came across one that it was unknown to the carrier, unknown to the driver. There was an unpaid parking ticket that was out there. But because roadside law enforcement now is required to query this system, they're detecting drivers that have outstanding suspensions or revocations. But if I was involved, and this is where I kind of get in the two part of this MVR service, if I participated in an MVR service that makes sure it queries SID lists in the clearinghouse, I would have known that. I would have had that ability. And that I could have removed or told the driver to get that suspension lifted, pay the reinstatement fees that's typically associated with it. But here we sat with a driver was placed out of service, a truck being towed, the customer not getting their freight. That hurts. That hurts client relations, your customer relations. In addition to MVR service, it allows the ability for the individual, once they have enrolled, put all the drivers into it, that they will then be notified of any type of changes that would occur with the driver's status. So it'll be any change in the status. For some reason, if they're downgraded because of a FedMed card that didn't get upgraded in time, or they received any type of traffic infractions, that MVR service will allow that safety manager ownership to see that there was a change and then take proper action to make sure our drivers are valid. Again, we cannot afford to have a driver that was unknowingly became suspended, driving perhaps, 4 or 5 states away, being placed out of service and have to fly a new driver out, towing the truck, and having all the additional expenses. So I'm an advocate of MVR services in a push-pull type of situation. Now, I know that Wisconsin has PARs, so I guess if your drivers were strictly staying within the state of Wisconsin and they were not crossing state lines and they were licensed drivers from Wisconsin, generally that's okay, only because what I am aware of is as of August, I believe, of last year, they were starting to incorporate this clearinghouse checks that states would query that also. So they should be aware of these nuances in other states also.
And beyond the obvious violations and things like that, they should be checking like what their expiration, all these other things, keep them in their DataQ in their driver qualification files, things like that. What else should they check on the MVRs?
Yeah, well, looking at the MVR, of course, validity, and we also want to make sure that we are putting them in the proper classes of trucks or vehicles that they were licensed for. I have seen situations where individuals are restricted to automatic transmissions, so you gotta make sure they don't go into a manual. We also want to be aware of any restrictions that the driver has. And to pay attention really closely is to look at the tiers of operation. One common one that I've seen is a driver that somehow maybe was losing or on the edge of not being medically qualified, thought it might be a good idea to claim themselves as exempt interstate, and they are not. If you're a for hire
Oh
company,
boy.
you are subject. So some drivers maybe did it by error, maybe it was intentional, but it's really important for that safety manager to check that on the MVR, do that the proper tier declaration on their driver's license for interstate, intrastate, and again, if they were accepted industry or non-accepted industry. And it just, the thing of it is too, is the driver has restrictions to glasses, those type of items. Just kind of reiterate that with the driver that, for somehow, some way they get stopped and they don't have their eyeglasses on and they're restricted to that. It is a double whammy violation, one for the restriction and one for not having a valid CDL because you violated the restriction. It really hurts the company greatly. And of course, it's driver record, right? We want to make sure the driver has a good record because we are evaluating their safety upon our highways. So if I bring out a new driver, have your minimum hiring standards, you probably have a policy. Make sure if you have that safe driving policy, the driver meets it, you're applying it equally. And then at the same time, especially if you're taking adverse employment action against a driver for it, that you've done it the same for every driver that's out there, basically. So, but a documented type of policy is probably the most important and to follow it.
We touched on it a little before with the DataQ system and the CPDP, the Crash Preventability Determination Program. Does it really make a measurable difference? What do you see when carriers are able to have a successful DataQ or CPDP? And maybe tell them what the CPDP is.
Correct. Well, absolutely makes a difference. Remember, I was out there for 27 years. Did I make a mistake? Yes, I did. Almost every officer out there will sometime get humble and he will make a mistake. The idea is either becoming aware of it and correcting it, and never letting it happen again. But the data quality review system allows then, if it's not caught by the officer, the company would have the opportunity to view the inspection report. I say, number one, keep the copy of the original inspection report given by that driver because it has the most details. It has the note sections. It has other information that you're going to find that's important. And with that information, then they have the ability to make sure it was true and accurate. If the officer made a mistake, we want to have the ability as a carrier to do a data quality review dispute, but we need to be able to show where the breakdown occurred, why the officer more likely made the mistake. Was it a CVSA policy that they didn't follow, or they simply overlooked something that was obvious, I mean, registration credentials, something that was there? With that data queue, what we're doing then is we're keeping that information clean. If you're being evaluated, and you are, by insurers, shippers, receivers, brokers, any business affiliation, you're being evaluated by your CSA scores. Again, it was never meant to get as far as it did, but it's here now. Congress eventually authorized it to be publicly viewable. So you also deserve to have a record that is proper. So that system does it. It allows you to have it. It's a basic administrative process. There's two parts. One would be that we have the data queue for basic violations that are incorrect. Or could be, other things, wrong carrier, it's listed, it's not your inspection report, a few other things in there. Then we also have if a citation was issued and the driver went to court or the carrier went to court for it, and it was one of these CSA type of violations, if they dismiss it or they amend it, we can do what's called a citation adjudication data queue to get that either removed if it's dismissed or reduced in points if it's been amended. The next one is you just mentioned the crash determination program, crash preventability. So if we find now, this is a big one for anybody out there, is we have crashes that are all obviously might be state reportable. Any crash over $1,000 in the state of Wisconsin, $200 or so to governmental, or any injury is going to be reported to the state of Wisconsin. The next thing is the investigating officer needs to check the correct box, and if they make a mistake, you could be assigned a crash that's really not, might be reportable to the state, but it's not FMCSA recordable. So we need to look at that data to make sure, should that crash record even be on my record? But if it is, then the next level is, does it meet our new program eligibility requirements for non-preventability? The new publication came out in December of 2024, and thankfully they included a lot more categories. Particularly, they included categories that I say hugely benefits Midwestern carriers. Anybody operating in snow and ice conditions. We have more spinouts, more unique collisions with vehicles. It'll help them. The uniqueness with that is if it doesn't take long. If you're a small truck operation, maybe 15 to 20 trucks or less, if you have two or more crashes, you're probably already an alert. And if those are both non-preventable because another car lost control, slid into you, and it meets that criteria, you're in an alert when you really don't have to be. So the most important thing is you identify it's eligible for the program. You need to do a submission to the crash preventability program. And I say almost immediately, get a copy of the police crash report. As soon as you know it meets the program criteria, submit it. It is taking between 30 to 90 days for FMCSA to even approve or act on it. Then you realize that we have to wait for the CSA update schedule. That only happens once a month. So depending on when it actually got approved and uploaded, we could have a crash that they were preventable. You look at it as a carrier, says nothing my driver could have done, but you're stuck with it, perhaps an alert for up to 4 months. And if you're going through an insurance renewal program, or if you're working with a certain broker and that puts you in alert, you may be paying more insurance, you may have lost preferential insurance markets, or you may lose relationship with a broker or a customer. So be on top of this crash data queue. So I'm a huge proponent. You scour every inspection report for validity to make sure it's true and accurate. And crashes, you need to make sure that if they're eligible or not. If they're eligible for that preventability, submit them immediately. Again, bottom line is we're human. Law enforcement makes mistakes, just like all of us do, even to this day. So take advantage of that program. And also the other thing is out of service criteria. We know that out of service increases those points. So if you're not aware of what the out of service criteria is, I'm also an advocate of every motor carrier out there, at least once every 2 years or so, order a copy of the out of service criteria. So if you get an inspection report that indicates out of service, was it placed out of service properly? I do see mistaken out of service applications. The officer read the out of service criteria incorrectly. Not always, but it can happen.
I had an interesting situation come up this week. One of our carriers brought to my attention some fraud that's occurring on their CSA score. Somebody went in and wanted to DataQ 9 clean inspections and change them to a different US DOT number, and how can you avoid that, or what can be done for that? The FMCSA is aware of it, but I think carriers should also be aware that maybe they need to check their CSA scores and see if or if someone's trying to do a data queue, why they're doing a data queue.
Yeah, that's when you had made me aware of that, and I looked a little bit at the situation, because what's also affects our CSA scores, it's good inspections. Good inspection adds time weights that dilutes the violation points, the total weights. So we want good inspections. And apparently in this scenario, as it was described here, somebody's trying to steal the good inspections to dilute the bad ones and give them a good safety score, right? My,
Yeah, crazy.
my only my only hope with that is one is whoever's responsible for safety in a company is at least, I don't know, once a week, at least once a month. I mean, I say at least once a week, going into their FMCSA portal account. And to get in the portal account, we know we now need the .gov account. So if these are strange words, I encourage those safety managers, directors, or ownerships, if they're responsible, to get in the system, get their .gov account, to get into their FMCSA portal, and they can pretty much look at inspection reports that occurred in the last 24 hours, even if any even are missing. But if you've looked at your safety profile in all your 7 measurement categories and you know what you have for inspections, somehow if you start seeing changes to your safety score to the negative, because if you're taking away good inspections, your safety score might go down for no reason. Investigate that. So my hope is on the back end of this, Kim, is that the systems for FMCSA, they use one that's called the Motor Carrier Management Information System. It's very robust. And in my experience, when I utilized that, I could tell when somebody made an update to the MCS 150, who did it, what time. There's a lot of IP addresses, a lot of things. So let's hope that the Officer Inspector General, whoever's the one that's working with the transportation industry, is looking into it. But here's what you got to do: you got to file that complaint. If you get into the National Complaint Database, file a complaint, and I know that it's going to be really on you. Well, it's going to be difficult to prove who it was, but they should be able to file that inspection and observe where it went to. You can find out where that inspection went to by VIN numbers, by plate numbers, by driver's names. They should be able to investigate that. So let's hope that's a speedy investigation on that one.
Yeah. I mean, telematics now too are so important in the industry. There's every system out there, and some people don't want to waste the money or spend the time or whatever, but let me know what you feel is key in companies diving into some of these and preventing some of this and checking all this information. It's sad we have to do it nowadays, but I think we have to do it to protect ourselves.
Right. So you're speaking of the telematics about ELDs, tampering and so forth, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, a little
So,
bit, but there's so
right.
many systems in place where you can track your data and follow your data and have everybody
Good.
else, looking for you. But yeah, everything that you have to do nowadays to make sure that nobody's getting into your system and committing
Right.
fraud.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on infiltrating an ELD system, although that was discussed, the ability to do that. We are aware of that as of April 1st of this year, inspectors will be placing extra effort on ELD tampering and manipulated devices. They've done quite a bit of research on the detection of those. So it's widely aware of. The ELDs have been getting manipulated. Data records have been sent off to an offsite location to where there's a 2, maybe 15-minute wait to get back a ELD record that says I have more driving time. They see it. It has been
Crazy.
more difficult. So I'm aware that FMCSA is working also with ELD vendors, removing vendors that allow that backdoor opportunity. So they hopefully will close those loops to be aggressive with it, because it's not fair to the rest of us, right? If my company is doing things right, I'm following the rules, I shouldn't have to compete. And then secondly, all of our families drive that highway. We cannot afford to have a driver that's being forced or fatigued to operate beyond the hours of service. So we want to watch that. But and that's just one piece of technology, Kim. There's so much more stuff out there too. We know that our camera systems have moved into the ability to use it as a coaching device. So if we have drivers that are following too close, we have lane issues, failure to stop, those type of things. We have to use that technology to help coach the drivers. And often we hear, well, that technology is going to hurt us. It's going to show my driver was at fault. Well, that is not the majority of time. That's the rarity of the time with a good driver training program, taking that responsibility. But if it does happen, what the ability of it is, and at least that's the view of the insurance industry, is if our client would have been involved in a crash, you have the ability to make it right away. You're not going to drag out some litigation. You're not going to drag anything out. Responsibility is being responsible, and you need to own up to that. So I'd say for any carriers in Wisconsin worried about that, it'd probably be more about a rapid um, settlement, instead of dragging it out, because that's where the costs really come in. But that's the flip of the coin. Let's say your driver has done everything right. It's been known that we've had much fraud where automobiles have stopped there, especially in traffic situations. I'm going to say, I don't want to use Chicago or Illinois, but
And use New Orleans,
we
Louisiana.
we are aware of situations where drivers have had cars back into them at high rates of speed, making it appear as though the truck were into them. That's insurance fraud. That's a crime. But the camera systems are helping them tremendously. And one little side note on that, we know that insurance rules across the whole United States are just a little bit different. There's at-fault states and so forth, and no-fault states, and just different terminology that's out there. I can say that at least in Florida is one, some of the rules are changing a bit that if they can show that the other person was 51% or more at fault, and I look at cameras, cameras help tremendously. You're not necessarily just paying out that claim, the full amount on your policy. So it's about protecting. And again, we know cameras have a lot of adverse feelings from the drivers. Another situation with a client that had a seatbelt violation, and they were able to show through an interior facing camera the seatbelt was worn the whole time. So the officer made a mistake. He thought the seatbelt wasn't worn, but it actually was. So there's various places where it's beneficial to use that technology.
Firsthand knowledge. Before I came here, I was with a carrier, and I was a terminal manager, and we had front and rear, forward and driver facing cameras, and it more times it got the driver out of a situation than into a situation, to the point that they actually put cameras in their own vehicles. And we had people jump out and commit suicide in front of the truck, and the camera cleared them. So it's so important. And I know it seems like it's invasive. I would say, I don't want to see you in the truck either without your clothes on. We're not looking for that.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's not it. There's a lot of companies that have policies that what they would do is once that parking brake gets set, they might let them cover it up with a cap or something like that. But once the brakes are released and the truck's rolling, they want to see that that's there with it. So yeah, I would say there's far more benefits. And hey, that technology rolled out even before that, and I used my past career in our state patrol cruisers. At first, there was a lot of reluctance because if you're being watched. In the end, it saved so many frivolous lawsuits and accusations. It's beloved now, I would say, that we want that. I'm not a big camera guy. I'm not a big government oversight kind of person, but there's some places where it's appropriate when driving. And as you mentioned, Kim, cars are putting them in. I have them in all my vehicles. And I kind of say this for our seasonal construction material businesses in Wisconsin, construction, hauling gravels and sands and so forth. And we know that Wisconsin does not have a tarping law. We do not have a mud flap law on dump-bodied vehicles. But no matter what, it can't come out. The load can't come out. So I always said to the drivers, maybe coming from sand facilities or small gravel stone, and they're trying to travel on a 70, 60, 70 mile an hour road, eventually it starts blowing out. So what are their choices? The choices is to not let it blow up with a tarp, traveling at a speed and a location not impeding traffic, but travel at a slower speed. Then also be aware of in the past, um, I'd get phone calls of vehicles losing stones, damaging windshields. When I was a supervisor, I couldn't corroborate that. I wasn't there. The automobile driver had no way of proving it to me. It could have been stone damage from 10 days ago. But with cameras in cars now, they're going to be able to show damage that occurs as it occurs going down the road. So here again, I say, and many, many companies, they don't want loss. They want to do things right, but be aware of the ability now of the automobile driver to file a claim and probably be supported in windshield replacements if we don't do a good job wiping off the tailboards, wiping off the sideboards on, let's say, dump trucks hauling aggregates.
So we touched on a lot of challenges today for the motor carrier industry, and sometimes you wonder why we're all in this business. Yeah, and it's a great industry. In closing, have we touched on everything, or is there one thing that you would like to tell the carriers to be in compliance or to help them be in compliance?
Well, there is one that keeps coming up, and it's been kind of a concern of mine even back in the patrol days, and that is what we need to be very careful of in the state of Wisconsin. We have a very unique CDL law. Not having a CDL is a traffic crime. It's not just a basic traffic citation; it's a traffic crime, mandatory court appearance. So the definition of a commercial motor vehicle basically is generally a vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating of 26,001 pounds or more, actual weight or gross vehicle weight rating or combination gross vehicle weight rating. And if it's a vehicle towing a trailer over 10,001, it kicks it into a Class A commercial motor vehicle. across most states and in the federal safety regulation book itself, they only consider gross vehicle weight ratings and actual weight. In Wisconsin, we have one additional requirement that was put in. My understanding is it wasn't really done with a lot of thought. They just thought it was the right thing at the time, maybe mirroring some some IFTA rules. And that is back in the adoption of the federal safety regulations or CDL law. Wisconsin didn't adopt the CDL law as it appears in Part 383. We just copied the language and put it into our law. And then there's a few additions that got put in there. So we're a little bit more restrictive. We include registered weight too. So please be very careful when you're registering. If a straight truck is, let's say, right at 26,000 pounds, it would be a non-CDL vehicle. If you decide to put plates on it for a registered weight of 32,000 pounds, you just created a Class B commercial motor vehicle. Worst case scenario, I could have a Chevy S10 pickup truck, which they're almost gone now. They're rotted out. But a Chevy S10 pickup truck, I could put a 12,000 pound plate on there if I want to. And I'm going to pull a snowmobile trailer. And if I put a 12,000 pound plate on the truck, if I put let's say I go 16,000 pounds on a snowmobile trailer, it obviously can't hold all that weight. It's absurd. You'd be wasting your registration money, but I see over registration a lot. But that would be a Class A commercial motor vehicle needing a Class A CDL. S10 pickup truck, that trailer, that registration. So we hope to change that in the future, but that's a large issue, especially in the construction industry, either buying too large trailers or over registering. So that's just one that's been coming up quite a bit. I know that as an association, we have you have testified and hoping to get that corrected for our membership across the state, because that's one I think that has placed people in criminal situations where it shouldn't. But we'll keep doing that, right? We're going to try doing looking out for our clients, your membership there in Wisconsin. And to close, Kim, I just want to thank you. And Acrisure is very happy to participate in this podcast. Very happy to participate in the events that you have there, because in essence, I bring a lot of pride to take back to Wisconsin, because that's my hometown. My father was involved in trucking, and it gives me an opportunity to use my knowledge to give something back to the industry. So thank you very much for the invite to be here, Kim.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it. And thank you, Acrisure.
Okay, that is going to do it for today's episode of The Road Ahead. Thank you, Kim. And of course, thank you, Mark Abrahamson with Acrisure, sponsor of today's podcast. On behalf of the Wisconsin Motor Carriers Association, thank you for listening in and being part of the Wisconsin's trucking community. If you found today's conversation helpful, be sure to follow the podcast and share it with your team. Your engagement helps us bring more insight, more expertise, and more real-world solutions to the issues carriers face every day. And don't forget, new episodes of The Road Ahead are released on the last Friday of each month. So keep an eye on your email and social media, because we've got more great topics and guests lined up in the months to come. Until next time, I'm Dan Johnson. Stay safe, stay compliant, and we'll see you next time on The Road Ahead.